Velkommen nok en gang til Akk Oy Vey Jødepodden, podcasten der jeg, Nina Grünfeldt, sammen med gjester og venner snakker om livet og andre aktualiteter, men sett med et jødisk skråblikk. I nesten 20 år har Shaul Willem sammen med sin ektefelle Ester sett det som sitt kall å leve og virke her i Norge for å vekke norske jøders interesse for det jødiske. I denne episoden, som på engelsk, møter dere Chabaden. Welcome, Shaul.
Thank you.
When you entered, I said Shana Tova. It's because it was just Rosh Hashanah, which is Jewish New Year. What does that mean to you?
Rosh Hashanah is, it's the head of the year. Rosh, in fact, means head. And in Jewish tradition, we are taught that the head of the year is the time of rethinking our past year and our life up until now, in order to be able to proceed and move forward with the coming year, being the people we really are supposed to be. And just like a head that has within it all the functions and the hardware of everything that happens in our entire being, Rosh Hashanah is the same idea. It's a time we spend most with prayer, in family, because those are the most important things. To contemplate about the world around us. Rosh Hashanah, we don't only pray about and we don't only think about ourselves, our families, and even the Jewish community. Very, very much of the focus is about having a world in which everyone can actually live in with respect and love and peace. So that's what Rosh Hashanah is to me, and that's what I hope that I portray to my own family and to those who I'm involved with.
And next week is Yom Kippur, and isn't that the day of atonement?
Right. So Yom Kippur will begin on Tuesday evening until Wednesday evening. It's 25 hours. In which it's considered the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. Many Jews I know here in Norway also very easily ask for permission and get their day off work because of religious rites. And it's a day spent on true inner search about who we are and where we are in life. And it's a beautiful idea, one that I share many times when I speak in universities and schools here, to stop, to take a day of the year and do nothing but think about where I am and where I would like to be. And part of that is obviously to ask for forgiveness from God. But prior to that, Jewish tradition teaches us that God says, between you and I can deal with, but first deal with all your human relationships. And it begins sometimes with people which are very close to us, and it obviously to the people around us that we may have hurt, sometimes even intentionally, unfortunately. But it takes humility, it takes courage to ask for forgiveness, receive forgiveness, so that we can start a new slate and look forward for a much better year.
So you are clearly a very wise man that I can already hear. I invited you here, Shaul, because you are the Chabad in Oslo in Norway. I know not so much about you, so I would love to learn to know you a little bit better. Tell my listeners, who are you? Where do you come from? What is your family background?
Lovely question. I was born in 1971 in Jerusalem. I am 10th generation born in Jerusalem. 14th generation born in, I'll say, the Holy Land, because before that, yes, it was Palestine, but before that it was the Ottoman Empire. So I'm 14th generation born in the Holy Land, 10th in Jerusalem. My parents, both of my parents, both born in Israel. My father a year exactly to the day before the birth of the modern state of Israel. My grandparents, with the exception of my mother's father, were all born in Israel too. My mother's father is originally from the Ukraine, Berdichev, Kiev, etc. And I was born there, and at the age of 3.5, my parents left Israel for London in 1974, and more or less from then until 1987, most of my upbringing was in London, England. In my home, we are an observant Jewish home. Both of my parents belong to the Chabad movement, as Chabad being a Hasidic group. But the community in London is very, very broad. The synagogue we prayed was not in a Chabad synagogue. Some of my schooling was not in a Chabad school. It was in the Jewish schools, local Jewish schools. In 1987, I left London for New York, where I was very fortunate to be in a yeshiva, a Talmudic college. Religious school in Brooklyn, where Chabad has its headquarters. And at the time, the Rebbe, who of blessed memory, who passed away in 1994, but when I arrived in 1987, so I was in the yeshiva in that neighborhood. And
meaning you are influenced by his thoughts?
Very strongly. Very strongly.
What was his name?
Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. So he is the 7th Hasidic master within the Chabad movement.
The Hasidism is something that evolves in Poland, right? Mainly in the early 18th century?
So Hasidism started in the early 18th century, but it started in what we would call then Poland or White Russia, Belarus, yeah. And it started from the founder of the Hasidic movement was called Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov means the master of the good name.
And those rabbis that you're referring to, they are very important. They are like ideological leaders at different times in different communities, aren't they?
Very, very much. The Hasidic movement per se began at a time when Jews in Europe were after pogroms, and the situation of even literacy within the Jewish community was at a low. And obviously being under the rule of governors and kings and whatnot all over Europe. And the Baal Shem Tov was the one who came and inspired an entire new thinking and broke the pyramid within the Jewish communities.
And what was that pyramid? I mean, before Hasidism, because Hasidism is like a contra, maybe not revolution, but it's a movement opposing something existing, right? So what is it actually opposing towards?
That's interesting. I wouldn't call it opposing. It's more reviving something that was lost over the years within the Jewish community, which was, if we look back 250, 300 years, we will see that in many Jewish communities around Europe, if you'd come to a shtetl, to a little village,
Jewish village.
A small Jewish village, you'll have the synagogue of the scholars, you'll have the synagogue of the blacksmiths, and then you'll have the synagogue of the gold and silversmiths. In other words, there was a hierarchy which was half spoken about and half not spoken about. The Baal Shem Tov came around and inspired something which changed history in Jewish history, which later, in fact, became the Enlightenment movement or everything that we know in the modern world today. The idea that every single person counts, and to stop seeing the superficial aspects of people, of the individual, rather to focus on the commonality, on the uniqueness of the individual. And it was a huge revolution, because there were people which were, this is the first time they're suddenly being told that, the simpletons are of the same value. Today, thank God, we're living in a world where more and more people understand that and know that, and we're still all of us trying to evolve into being people that truly appreciate every human being for who they are. But at that time, it was a complete revolution. The Baal Shem Tov himself, with his own students, which were, I'm talking about the learned students, they questioned him. They asked him, why are you spending time with simpletons? What's the point? It's a waste of time. Give them a little food, give them a little sustenance, and move on. But this was his main focus, and it changed Jewish history. And in a sense, everything that we're seeing today within the Jewish world was his beginning of his revolution.
To me, it's always been quite obvious that the thought of the individual's value, of course, very naturally comes or evolves also in Judaism, because as a minority in any society, we were not a part of the novelty. We were not a part of the hierarchy of the structure in the society. Our priesthood is not something which is committed, to the celibacy, which doesn't make that kind of a hierarchy which you have in the Vatican.
Correct. Or
in the Catholicism, So to me, it's just quite obvious that the thoughts about the egalitarian kind of society is very natural for Jewish culture and religion.
It absolutely is. It goes back to all the way in Genesis, right at the beginning of creation, in the narrative, the way the Bible tells us, of how Adam and Eve were created. That each individual, not Jews, Adam meaning human being, Adam being the human being, is created in the image of God, meaning that every single human being has something absolutely unique about him or her, and has therefore what to contribute to the world that no one else can. This is not to excuse, this is just the reality. The reality is that over the years and the tremendous persecution, right, in Europe and in around the world. So about 1,000 years ago, when Jews started to settle more and more, it goes back 2,000 years to Rome, but in the last 1,000 years, when more and more Jews settled in Europe, it naturally became that there were the scholars, the rabbis, and folk.
But wasn't there a danger, actually, that some of those famous rabbis almost became like messianic, that people would worship them as if they were the new Messiah?
Well, there was the famous Shabtai Tzvi, right? If we look back, and he in fact manipulated the society, Jewish society, to believe that in him.
So Jews can be corrupt as well.
Everyone has a choice.
Yeah.
And this is obviously the most important lesson, that fundamental idea that Judaism teaches us, that every single human being has a choice, right? We teach our children at home, and a kitchen knife can be used by mom or dad to create the most beautiful and delicious food, but God forbid the exact same knife can be used, and this is true about everyone and everything. Of course, we are all human, and that's what makes us who we are.
Yeah. So what is Chabadism today, and how has the Chabad movement been influenced by the Holocaust? Because there is kind of a revival after the Holocaust, isn't there?
Absolutely. Okay, so just to make it clear, I was not earlier speaking about Chabad. I was speaking about the general Hasidic founder, the founder of the Baal Shem Tov. And when he passed away, his message was divided among his disciples, who sort of took Europe in a very interesting way. This is hundreds of years ago. And they divided it. They said, okay, you'll take Belarus, you'll take part of Poland, you'll take part of Hungary. There's somebody here in Norway who showed me a picture of a tombstone of his great-great-grandfather going back 7-8 generations, who his great-grandfather was sent to Romania to sort of bring this message of love. But it's not just in a sense of message of love, it's the message of uniqueness of the human being and being able to stop looking at each other just by what we actually do, how we dress, etc., but to look at the soul of the person. So this was the Baal Shem Tov. Chabad started 2 generations after the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Chabad movement, and this developed over the years. The Rebbe, who I mentioned earlier, who is a direct descendant of the first Chabad Rebbe 7 generations ago, he was born in 1902, and his life story began in 1902 to 1994. I probably don't have to tell you, Nina. That's living through being born in the Ukraine and then going through 1917 as a teenager. Mm-hmm. Right?
The revolution, the First World War.
First World War. Watching his parents, his father and mother, his father was the rabbi of what today is Dnepropetrovsk or Dnieper today. His father was the chief rabbi there. Watching the refugees coming in and his mother feeding thousands of people. And then and watching the revolution happening in front of his own eyes, right? And then beginning with the Soviet era, with all of its harshness against Jewish life. I mean, I'm obviously communism.
But also being a new start for many Jews, believing that now is a new time and equality for everyone.
Correct. And then moving on, and then escaping or leaving Russia in 1928, Stalinistic Russia, 1928. You couldn't get a harsher, more difficult time with his father-in-law, who was then the leader of the Chabad movement, and then escaping to Poland, going to Berlin, and then to Paris and learning in the Sorbonne, mm-hmm. and then the war. Mm. Right?
The Second World War.
And then the Second World War. And escaping France and then through Portugal and coming to the States in 1941.
Okay, so during the war actually.
During the war, yeah.
So this is the person who brings the Chabad movement from Europe to the States? To
the States. So his father-in-law was the one who managed to make it to New York a year prior in 1940.
You already had Hasidim in the States before the war, right?
Correct.
But the Chabad not.
It was very small, mm-hmm. and they were very instrumental, in fact, in being able to procure the paperwork, etc., for the leader of Chabad to be able to leave war-torn Europe and come to the States. And then living in the States and receiving the messages about his family's demise. The second day Rosh Hashanah, which was just 2 days ago, was when his sister-in-law and brother-in-law were gassed in Treblinka in 1941. I mean, this was very close to home. His brother, his grandmother, and these messages are coming in and trying whatever they could out of United States to try and help the situation. But then the war ends, the Second World War ends with the Holocaust in 1945. And 5 years later, his father-in-law passes away. That's when the Rabbi Schneerson, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, becomes the leader of Chabad. And what happens then, Nina, is a true revolution in the Jewish world. Very unlike most Jewish leaders who, this is not to, God forbid, be seen as any type of criticism or judgment, God forbid, but everyone was trying to save whatever they could, right? So if a rabbi who came from a certain city or certain village and survived, or his son or family survived, they tried to gather their own and rebuild whatever they could in and recreate a sort of virtual shtetl, whether it was in New York, in Montreal, or in Israel, which by then. And the Rebbe strongly believed that we cannot sit back and relax after the Holocaust. And we absolutely have, when I say we, obviously the Rebbe was speaking to his own then very small group of followers, and what's developed is incredible, but it wasn't only to his own followers, it was to anyone who was ready to listen. Any type of Jewish leader from any group on planet Earth, the Rebbe encouraged every single one that we must reach out to everyone.
Exactly. And usually when I talk about you to people who are not a part of the Jewish community, I usually say that you are doing the intermissionary work. You are trying to make Jews come back to Judaism, because Judaism is not a missionary religion. We don't want everybody to come to our religion. But as far as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, your job being here, well, I'll ask you, what is your job being here? But it does have to do with awakening the Jewish consciousness among Jews in Norway. Is that correct?
I should hire you as my spokesman. Judaism doesn't believe in missionaries, in missionary work, because by definition Judaism respects every religion by definition, and therefore no one needs to be Jewish in order to fulfill his or her mission in life.
So why is it important then to bring Jews back to Judaism?
I can answer that question on so many levels, but I'll begin with what drives me. First of all, if we were to cut away at everything and go to the core of it, we've been persecuted unfortunately, for so long, ultimately because we have stood our ground of who we are and what our identity is. For a Jewish boy in Norway to put on tefillin, which is to connect and do an act which the Torah told us to do.
Which is to put on the object that
on the object that a man is required to put on in order to pray each weekday, which within it contains the most fundamental belief of one God. Or whatever it is. It might be Hanukkah candles. It might be whatever it is for a Jewish boy, a girl, a family. I'm talking about Norway because I live here in Norway. It's to connect with beginning with their own identity. That's who we are. We don't have to feel apologetic about it. We don't need to feel fearful about it. We're living in a modern world, and we can be very confident that this is who we are, and we are continuing the golden chain of thousands of years. So it's very important for us to be who we are at every given moment, especially when we're so fortunate to live in an open, free society. We don't have to hide from anyone. If nothing else, it's to give meaning or to fulfill. In the Second World War, we lost millions of people. And with that, we've lost billions of good deeds and actions that these millions of people would have done, could have done, were they to have lived their life
And had their children and grandchildren.
And had their children and grandchildren.
You know, I often, people when they ask how many Jews there are in Norway, they get stunned when I say it's like a couple of thousand at the top. And then when we talk about how many Jews there are in Europe and how many there should have been, who should have been your neighbor, who should have been your friend in school, my assumption is there should have been somewhere between 20 and 30 million Jews in Europe.
You've touched a point that I always make when I speak here in schools. My grandparents married in Israel, then Palestine, in 1942. They were a young couple, they married in 1942. They came from a religious background, and obviously the way life was then, and they had 10 children, right? If we take everyone who should have gotten married between 1939 and 1945, and we say that they would have had 2 or 3 children, and then multiply it further. Where are we talking about 6 million? We're talking about...
Well, it's just to see how the population in general grows and then adapt that to the Jewish community.
Correct.
And that would be the number. So, so let's just sum up a little bit, Shaul. So you were educated in the States. There is this big Chabad community in Brooklyn. I think there are about 300,000 Jews or something in Brooklyn, in the Chabad movement?
Not in the Chabad movement. There are about 300,000 observant Jews in Brooklyn. But there's the headquarters of Chabad is in Brooklyn. And today Chabad has 4,000 centers around the world. In about, I've lost count if it's 102, 104 countries, but the message keeps on growing. I don't know that there ever, when he started this in 1950, had a vision of I'm gonna have the largest Jewish movement to have ever existed. I don't think that was the goal at all. I think the goal was and remains to be, as we see again and again, that leaders from every Jewish community who were never Chabadniks and never lived as Chabad people, and some of them were Reformed rabbis or conservative leaders within the Jewish, and the Rebbe encouraged every single one to go out there and reach out and bring the message of Judaism to the Jewish community and by extension to the world around us.
You are one of these 4,000 couples going out there. And now you've been here for about 20 years, haven't you?
Just celebrated 18 years.
So what do you feel by now? Are you Israeli, American, English, Norwegian? Where do you belong?
I've never seen myself. This is the truth, because people struggle with this in their own lives, and I've never struggled with this. I've always seen myself honestly as a Jew.
You know, maybe it's a very Norwegian question. We always ask that. Where do you come from? How do you feel? Do you feel Norwegian now? Are you Norwegian now? Have you become a Norwegian now, finally? You know, maybe...
I will say that Norway is my home. Norway is my home. There's nothing to talk about. Esther and myself, Norway is our home. Our children see Norway as their home. Although some of them already study outside of Norway, Norway is our home in every way. This is where we live, and this is where we really love to be. This is the reality. My only apology, it's the time before Yom Kippur, is that I don't yet speak perfect Norwegian, but I am continually trying. It's my own fault. I don't have any excuse for it. I just don't.
You can make yourself understood in the most necessary ways, and otherwise, of course, Norwegians are good in English. Good for you.
Exactly, Norwegians. But that's. I wasn't going to say that because that sounds like an excuse, and it's not. I'm not trying to excuse something that. But Norway is our home. Norway is our home.
So, did you choose Norway, or were you placed here by the Chabad movement?
We're not placed anywhere. I mean,
it's not like you're being sent out like the missionaries were in the old days?
No, really not. Esther and I, when we got married, when we dated and married, we knew that we wanted to making a difference within a Jewish life somewhere on planet Earth, and we didn't know where. At that time, I was the principal headmaster of a Jewish religious school in Michigan. And after doing this for 6 years, it came to a point where we felt, okay, we had given back to within the society we came from what we could, and now it was time to actually move out and do something very real. There was a position we were looking at in Moscow. There was a position we were looking at in Portland, Maine. We were looking at Dartmouth University, which we visited. And we heard that there was an interest from a group of people here living in Norway that Chabad should actually establish itself here. Esther and myself, as I mentioned, I grew up in London, my formative years, and Esther is from London. So I know this is almost comical because I've lived here for long enough to know how ridiculous this sounds, but I'll say it anyway. We thought, we're from England, Norway's in Europe, how different can it be? There you go.
Closer to home.
So I've said it openly, So we thought that, how different can it be than England?
So here you come to this very, very small country in the far up north. It's a little bit colder than England, not that much though, and not after the climate changes.
Right.
Anyway, and there's just this very, very small community. And so how do you operate, and how was it coming here?
We came here knowing no one. There was no advantage or disadvantage. We came here.
But somebody wanted you.
Yeah. There was a few people who wanted us, but it's not like we knew any one person. We knew them. We came here first in 2002 for about 10 days just to see what is Norway. And after that, we took our time and decided that we would take the plunge. And we came here in 2004. It's been an interesting ride, Nina.
I just participated in a lovely bar mitzvah that you held. There were so many people there, and the atmosphere was so nice. And the way you held the service was so inclusive. And I haven't been to any of your arrangements or services before. I understand why people come to you.
That's very kind of you.
So, but still, I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but I must say I am a little bit curious. How is it being a Chabad where there's only one synagogue, and they obviously are a little bit skeptic, and I don't know why.
Why they're skeptic? It's taken me time. I mean, life has taught me that many times skepticism doesn't come from. It comes from well-meaning people something new is in town. How is this going to affect the balance within the society, etc. And to be honest, it's amazing that the community, the denne, has been able to do what they have done over the years to keep things together. I was coming here for something completely different. I'm not coming here to do anything but, first of all, to reach out. And I wouldn't even call it reach out and call it reach in. Over the last 18 years, Esther and I have met hundreds of Jews that have absolutely no obvious connection to Judaism, certainly not in a way that they are associated in any way to any formal...
And I'm one of them.
There you go. I've had the most fascinating encounters with people here over the years. And at the same time, I'm here to offer, when I say I'm always including my wife, I hope that's clear. We are here to offer a deeper, more exciting understanding of what Judaism has to offer. And when people hear, many of us do things, right? You asked me about, on the phone when we spoke about being critical. Mm-hmm. You know, part of Judaism, part of the ritual and daily grind, if I can say, of Judaism is that there's so much that we have to do that many times we get lost in why are we doing what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And Chabad, when I say Chabad, I mean the philosophy of Chabad is to actually look at the soul of what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing. And when people understand that, they connect with themselves, they connect with themselves, they connect with their family. I mean, this bar mitzvah, we won't mention names just because it was a private event, but in the sense, right, we had a bar mitzvah boy who is Norwegian, Jewish.
Jewish mother and non-Jewish father.
Right, Jewish mother, non-Jewish father. Put in all the effort he could in order to celebrate the bar mitzvah. And then, lo and behold, because of that, there's an 80-year-old Jew, the great uncle, and then another great uncle who's 73 years old, who was born here in Norway, and didn't have the opportunity to have his own bar mitzvah. That is the biggest gift that I can think that we can do for ourselves. I don't need anything else. You know, when I wake up in the morning, why did I come to Norway? Because there you go. Because a 73-year-old, there was a moment in his life that he connected with his identity, with his background, with who we are, and why his parents and his grandparents were persecuted in the Holocaust. It's because exactly this is the biggest proof that we can and we will survive. And this is a message that's not only for us, Nina, this is a message for humanity. Mm-hmm. We're here, we have what to offer. We, meaning every one of us has, and Judaism has a message of hope and optimism despite everything that we read and see in the newspapers every day.
You know, I had a very interesting conversation with a woman called Nina Lichtenstein, who's a Norwegian converted to Judaism. And when I was asking her, what is it like being Jewish and not have a Holocaust story? And that was very interesting to talk to her about, because that is something that, as far as I interpret her, she will be questioned, maybe not literally, but she will feel it. Probably mostly from Jews, because non-Jews are not, you know, they don't think that much about it. And because most of Jews today have their Jewish identity to a big extent connected to the Holocaust identity and story. So to go back a little bit to the Chabad movement and the revival of that and the development of that after the war in the States, where you were also educated. What would Chabad movement be like if it was not for Holocaust? Would it exist at all?
I have no doubt. I really have no doubt, because the Holocaust brought in I'm talking about within this context of the question, right? The Holocaust brought a sense of urgency that's a fire that burned within the belly. That we have to go, and we can no longer, we don't have the luxury of being able to build our own community and everyone else. I mean, we just don't have that luxury. But without the Holocaust, if you look at the development of Chabad for 200 years prior to the Holocaust, you'll see a continual push towards this idea of outreach, in-reach, and being able to educate a generation which will be firm and strong, irrespective of, on the contrary, you know, if I can sharpen just this point, the message that Chabad has, and by extension, it's not a Chabad message, is that we in our times should stop seeing the world, or the affluent world, the modern world, as anything which is opposing Judaism. On the contrary, Judaism has what to offer, very real message and hope, not only hope, but real meaning in our daily experience in an affluent country, right? The given notion is, and I'm not the one to say this, that the more affluent the country or the more modern, the less religion there is. And we see this outside of the United States of America, which has its own history. I mean, most countries which are more affluent are less religious. Because we see sort of religion as a concurrence, as a competition to, or almost an opposing to the modern world. Chabad has never adopted that. On the contrary, the world is a place which was created by God and if we use it correctly, we have the message of true understanding and equality and tolerance in a very real way. It has its place very much within the society. So it might not be very often that we see it, but it's certainly natural.
Okay, so a little bit more prosaic questions.
Go ahead.
If I saw you in the street, I would immediately identify you as a religious Jewish man. Most Norwegians, I think they don't, but they can't really identify you. They don't know who or what you are. Some maybe do. When I watch you now, I'm not sure if you have the payas, do you?
No.
No, you don't. So you don't have those curls in front of your ears, but you have the kippah, you have a big beard, and you dress conservatively in a white shirt and a black dress, right?
Yeah.
So to me, you're a very eklatant, religious Jewish man. How does people react to you in the streets of Oslo?
The most often asked question I get in Norway is, can I take a picture of you?
And why do they want to do that?
You know, when I don't notice it anymore, my children always, especially my daughters, say, "Ta, do you notice how many people are looking at you?" If I would put all my attention towards that, I wouldn't be able to think about much else. But
do you get like uncomfortable attention, like anti-Semitic?
I think most people, as you say, many people don't know where to place me. I've had the funniest things. I mean, I was on my cell phone, my mobile phone ran out of battery, and I had to use a public phone in the middle of town in Turgata, and I called my wife, and somebody was standing next to me, and I naturally thought that this individual was waiting for the phone to. So I as soon as I got off the phone, I said, "Please." He says, "No. Can I ask you a question?" I said, "Of course." He said, Are you Shiite? I didn't say anything. I don't know what my face looked like.
So what he was asking was if you were a Muslim.
Yeah. So I said no. So he says, "Oh, you must be Sunni."
Okay.
I said, "No."
Another Muslim.
Yeah, another one. I said, "No." Oh, so he says, "Oh, so you're from Turkey, right?" No. Where do I start? You know. So it's little things like that over the years that are just very, very, hearing an elderly Norwegian man tell his probably a grandson who was looking at me and said, "Det ekte jødene." Whatever. My kids laugh because many people ask to take pictures. Other people just actually sort of you suddenly see them slip their phone out and they're taking it. I guess it makes sense. I mean, it's not something people see here. I had told you when we met on the phone about a woman who moved away from Norway, and she lives today in Israel. And she told me that the first time she was visiting Oslo, she was driving down, I don't know where, but somewhere here in Oslo, and she said, the first time I saw you, I actually almost got into a traffic accident because I suddenly saw someone dressed like you with your children holding their hands, and I almost went into the pole. I was like, "What is this? Is this even real?"
Yeah, but it is very rare. Sometimes you can see tourists visiting from the States or Israel or some other place where you have religious communities, but it's very rare. And to me, it's almost whenever I see somebody, it's almost like when I was a child walking down Karl Johan with my mom, and for the first time in my life I saw a black man. Right. And it was, you know, it was amazing, it was fantastic. Yeah. And I do have that kind of almost the same feeling, but at the same time I guess I can imagine that for you it must, do you feel like a fish out of water?
I don't, and I would credit my parents for that, because I grew up in London, and obviously London in the Jewish community, it's not like Oslo, I'm not going to come, but in the sense that you are who you are, you're living here, this is who this is your place. It's not like I wake up in the morning, I have a right to be here like everybody else. I live here, this is where I am, this is where I live here. I don't think about it. It really, I mean, sometimes it's intriguing, because sometimes I notice that, you know, when someone stares you in the eyes, you're naturally, you look back. And sometimes I catch myself looking at somebody and that person's obviously amazed or bewildered or whatever. Like, what is this thing here in the street? But okay, it's curious. I guess it's curiosity, right?
But you know, there was this really extraordinary thing happening a couple of years ago when you had the inauguration of a new Torah. Yeah. At the top of Karl Johan, Torget. Yeah. And that was also in the news, because that was something that I don't think ever had happened in Norway. Correct. Ever. And to normal, you know, regular, I guess, Norwegian people, that must have been something very, unless you've seen it in a film, you know, because you look like and you act like you and the people participating together with you at that event would, to most Norwegians, I guess, be something that looked like something that happens in a film.
Correct.
So how do you feel how did you feel then? Was this done to say something to the Norwegian community? Because you could easily have done it in your garden, right?
Right. So let's begin with the fact that it's the first time in known history that a Torah, a handwritten Bible, was completed in Norway. We had a scribe come down, and this was a brand new Torah, which was completed in Norway. So that was a historic moment in of itself.
And the Torah is a holy...
The Torah is the 5 books of Moses.
Mm-hmm. Which would actually equivalent to the Old Testament.
The Old Testament, correct. Mm-hmm. And it is written by a scribe, letter by letter, on parchment, with ink, with a feather, in tradition, and that hasn't changed. And
is it true that if he makes one mistake, you have to start all over?
It's true within the section that he is in the middle of writing, because it's obviously pieces of parchment that are sewed together very carefully. So if he were to make a mistake and write God's name in a certain way and make a mistake, he would have to rewrite that.
But not the whole thing.
Not the whole thing.
Okay. No. Oh, now I got relieved.
That in itself was a reason of celebration, because this is a huge celebration in every Jewish community around the world. Mm-hmm. There was a very strong message that Esther and I wanted to share, which, namely, to tell Jews in Norway that Norway is a safe country, and we can celebrate our Judaism openly, and we have nothing to fear. Of course, we have.
So there were no police.
We had police protection, because this is obviously but I believe police protection would have been and you know, you have a rally of 400 people in the middle of town. You're going to always have some sort of security there. So we had security there. I will tell you that before that, there were many people, Jews, living not only in Oslo, who called me and said, "Are you sure you should be doing this? On Karl Johan Gata, and you know, to take with Jewish music and everything else." And I said, either we're going to live a life of really believing that we're in a safe country with true religious equality and freedom, or not. I'm telling you that we can do this, and we can do this for ourselves, and show our children, and show society that we can celebrate our.
But isn't there a paradox here, Shaul? Because I agree with you. I mean, I've always felt safe. Right. There are some incidents in my family's history which is not very nice. Yeah. But at the same time, there is only one place in this country where there are a number of children that every morning meets guarded police when they arrive and leave kindergarten, and that is the Jewish community's kindergarten.
Yeah.
And those are armed police.
Yeah.
I think that is, to me, that is, it says such a clear message. I'll tell you an anecdote which I find very interesting. A friend of mine, he was working in Denmark for a couple of years, and he was working as a teacher then. And at the French school in Copenhagen, they got the message from the French authorities after the terror attack on Charlie Hebdo, which was also an attack on a kosher store, right? Of course. That they had to have police surveillance. And they said, okay, but what that ended up in was that people passing the school thought it was the Jewish school. And they were more afraid of being identified as a Jewish school than having police surveillance. So the police left.
Right.
That's quite interesting.
That's very interesting.
And to me, it's a little bit paradox that you say that you want to celebrate publicly and tell the Norwegian population that we are safe at the same time as the movement you are representing do exist as a result of the experiences after the war, making sure, arrest me if I'm wrong, that our identity has to live on and not forget. Maybe there is not a contradiction there, I'm not sure.
The question is an absolutely fair question, and it's obviously it's a point of discussion. But the two not necessarily need to be, conflated. There is the fact that Jewish children have to come to a Jewish school or a kindergarten and have the armed police is very, very unfortunate. It also, though, is a result of the realities that we live in, right? At the same time, we cannot escape the fact that we cannot hide all of the time. A Jewish school, a Jewish kindergarten here in Norway needs that protection, and it's unfortunate that we need it. It really is. And what you just said, the anecdote, I have not heard about it, but it's so complex and paradoxical all in one. At the same time, I will never cower to someone who has something negative to say to me, and I will, look. I live here in Norway for 18 years, and trust me, Nina, I know anti-Semitism exists. I know, I've experienced it myself, and I don't talk about it for my own reasons. This has nothing to do with Chabad, this is my own experiences. Norway as a whole, I personally believe, is light years ahead certainly than England. When I grew up, I learned every curse word in the world in English, the English language, not from home or from school. It was a completely regular part of my upbringing to walk down the street and someone opening their window and reminding me and teaching me some vulgar language.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't even flinch about it. This was just part of,
life.
Yeah. We came home, I had to take the bus home from school every day. I mean, it was, we went in pairs or whatever, because it was always, we came home from school and there were other schools who were going home, and it was, but and then coming to Norway, you can't compare. On the other hand, I know children and I know adults who were children in schools here, who were bullied, etc. And that's very real. But the only way, I shouldn't say the only way, the strongest way that we, without guns and without knives, is to show our presence. We're here, and we believe in the system. We believe that we're living in a country where we will be protected, and to put that behind and hide it and be apologetic about it doesn't bring us anything else, but it actually feeds that monster of, continual hate and prejudice, etc. I mean, I personally have experienced two incidences here in Norway that I believe, if I were to share them, although they happened some time ago, they could make today the front page of the papers here in Norway. But I won't tell. I've not shared them myself or Esther, except for very, very few people, for a reason, because I don't want to give these people the satisfaction that they have gotten under my skin, and I certainly don't want any copycats. And the bigger message is, Nina, that Norway does not represent Norway. When you have a few rotten apples, this is not Norway. On the contrary, so I'll tell you that when we marched down Karl Johan Gata with Jewish music, 400 people, and people from the shops, people came out and clapped their hands.
Cool.
Yeah, there wasn't an ounce of just something cute. An elderly woman stopped one of us and asked, "What is going on?" And the person said, "It's a Jewish celebration." She said, "What's the Jewish celebration?" He said, the Jews were celebrating over here the writing of a new Bible. And she said, in Norwegian, but she said, "Oh, you finally got rid of the old one?" And that'd be my best story.
She sounds Jewish.
So I find that hilarious.
Yeah, that was good. Okay, we're going to start rounding up, Shaul. You are obviously succeeding in your work here. I mean, slowly, you're growing. You are being recognized. People come to you for your advice. They come to you to get help, getting married, having brit milah or bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah or whatever. Do you do bat mitzvahs as well?
Yes,
for the
course.
girls? Yeah,
of course.
Yeah. Okay, because you're talking to a feminist here, and I know that you're a little bit old-fashioned, as the Orthodox are. Of course, Judaism, as most other religions, are patriarchic ideologies and societies.
Yeah.
And that has a cost. Anyway, some years ago, I met these two English boys, Bertie and Nathanael, and they had been in Israel for a year, and they had actually joined the army. And after this, they were going to hike in Norway, and they had nowhere to stay. They were going to go to a youth hostel. So I offered them to stay here, but I couldn't cook them a real kosher meal for the Shabbat. So I suggested they'll go to your place, and they did. And they came back, and they were totally flabbergasted. They were so happy. So you obviously keep your home open for a lot of people, and now you just told me you had the Rosh Hashanah dinner with more than 150 people?
Yes.
And you had to, there wasn't room for everybody?
There was not room. So this Rosh Hashanah, this past Sunday night, was the eve of Rosh Hashanah, and for the first time ever, and I cannot tell you how awkward it is for me to actually have to tell people that I don't have room. It goes against everything who I am. But I couldn't create more space. So my pledge in the beginning of the evening was that next year I will try harder to make sure that this doesn't happen. So we had a very large crowd. We had almost 160 people the first night of Rosh Hashanah. And every Shabbat we host, both Friday night and Shabbat day, primarily Jews and Jewish families, mixed Jewish families who live in Oslo, but people come from many places around Oslo too.
And then you serve them kosher food. And who makes all the food? Ester does?
Ester deserves all the credit. Yes.
That's a big job. Hopefully she has help.
She has some help.
Yeah. Not too much, it sounds.
We're still working on that. As she has help, and she does it with a tremendous amount of love. I mean, you tasted that food by the
it was so good.
But only love can produce food like that.
Honestly, often I think that kosher food doesn't really succeed in the way like the French and the Italians do. But that was really, really, really good.
It just depends who's cooking it.
Yeah.
No, but those two boys, by the way, that stayed here, I remember them, and they're still in touch with us till today.
Ah, cool. Yeah. And one of them got married.
One of them,
and I think he even had a child, actually.
A child, correct.
Yeah. And the other one is moving into the music industry.
Yes.
So, okay, another prosaic question then, Shaul. who pays for all of this? Your life and all that food and the renting the houses.
I'm going to say it as it is.
Yeah.
Part of a Chabad rabbi's daily schedule is that we need to fundraise every penny ourselves.
You're not financed by the movement in New York?
Not even with $1.
You're kidding. Are you raising all the money for all these activities?
I'm raising every single kroner for these activities.
So, I mean, you're not on the Norwegian state budget.
I'm not on the Norwegian state budget.
So how do you do it?
The first 3 years we had a sponsor who helped us with 30% of our expense so that we should be able to establish ourselves. That was which was huge. Just to make sure that doesn't sound like I'm not. That is huge credit, and we're very thankful for that. But outside of that, that was someone in Lubavitch headquarters had found a person who wanted to sort of be involved in something new and a new initiative, etc.
A foreign sponsor?
Yeah, a foreign sponsor. And then since then, I have to raise every single kroner.
But do you find them in Norway? I mean, is it private people who want to contribute, or how does it work?
It works by me calling people, sending emails.
Oh my God.
Text messages, WhatsApp.
Are you okay doing that? Or is it something you just have to do?
It is not my favorite part of my job. Quite the contrary, but it comes with the turf.
So when you feed 150 people, it's on your account?
It's on my dime. When I feed 150 people, the cost of the location and the food and everything that it involves, obviously we charged people to contribute.
Yeah.
But if you do the maths, it's no secret. You have almost 160 people paying 150 kroner each. You take that and you put it into what the cost is. Obviously, it doesn't cover it. Mm. And I reach out to people. I reach out a lot to people in Norway, but it's not only in Norway. It's with the way contributions work in Norway, it's also a lot different than it works in other countries, right?
What is the difference?
The difference is in the States, for instance, a person who gives a donation, it has a very real impact on how their taxes work.
Yeah, he can reduce it from the taxes.
Correct.
Exactly.
Here it's limited to, I think, 14,000 kroner a year. I think either 12 or 14,000 kroner a year. A person who gives any type of donation in Norway is really out of his or her pocket because there's no fringe benefit.
So there's nobody, you don't have an employer that you report to who pays your salary?
Absolutely not. I am who I am, and everything that I do is on what I can expand my horizon and try and help. So
your salary and your rate, I'm a little bit shocked here actually, because I was so convinced that your salary, your rent, your expenses were covered by the Chabad movement. And Norway is an expensive country, Shaul.
I know.
Are you sure?
Believe me, I know. I think I can teach some people how expensive Norway can be.
But recently you were in Israel and you married a new couple. It looked really, really beautiful. I just saw it on the Instagram, somebody's account. But then hopefully they bring you to Israel.
Yeah. So obviously that, when I flew to Israel for a wedding. So the family obviously asked me, and they don't expect me to pay a ticket, etc. And there's a lot of pressure that comes with it, because naturally there's always the thought I could do so much more if I would be able to only fundraise more. But there's a limit to how much time I can actually dedicate to fundraising when the phone is. I mean, since we've sat here, I don't know if you noticed how many phone calls and text messages have come in, but when people need real assistance, when I have my commitments to the classes that I give and to my family life and to everything else. So it is what it is. But yeah.
You know, my father, he always used to kind of tease me and say, you know, if you can't make it with anything, you know, you're a nice girl, you can always marry a rich American Jew. Which was, you know, kind of insulting, even though I think he meant it as a compliment. But he was a wise man, but at that time at that point he wasn't that wise. Anyway, couldn't you just find a rich American Jewish contributor?
So my question to you would be, Nina, why would a rich Jewish American contributor want to contribute to Jewish life in Norway?
To do good.
Right. So the question that I get, and I obviously don't only fundraise in Norway. I fundraise in Norway, I fundraise in Canada, in Israel, in England, in the States, and in Australia, and in Canada. But people ask me, I don't say, you're living in Norway. Norway is not exactly a third world country. It's not Kiev. I'm not talking about now after the war. I mean, you know, this isn't a backward country. This is a country which is affluent, which does well. Tell me why I should write a check
exactly
for Jews in Norway.
Which makes it even harder for you.
But my answer is because I'm you know, one person once asked me, what do I have to do with Norway? And my answer to him was, what do I have to do with anything in Norway? I'm in Norway not because I didn't come there to have a picnic and to
You wanted to come closer to England.
Yeah, I came there with a goal to try and make a difference.
Yeah.
And thank God I'm seeing that we are making a difference. And if we're making a difference, I'm giving you the opportunity to be part of making that difference. And there are many people, I guess I should grab the opportunity and thank them, because this is an opportunity to thank all those people. I woke up this morning and Esther has to go shopping today because tomorrow night is Shabbat and then Yom Kippur, and we're having, Yom Kippur is a fast day, so we have a large group of people coming to us to eat a very healthy meal right before the fast, and then Wednesday evening when the fast is over, a break fast. So I checked my account this morning to see, you know,
I hope you have some good agreements with grocery stores.
We have some very nice agreements. I mean, people are. The bottom line is that we manage.
Yeah.
And I'll invite anybody to help us, and that would be very nice. My point just this morning, I looked at my account, and there are quite a few people right now, because we're in this time of year, I guess, before Yom Kippur, had on their own voluntarily here in Norway sent us some very nice donations, which makes it
a little bit more easy.
Doesn't it? It's also very appreciative. I very appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I'm totally impressed. Okay, I'll round up by saying that participating in your service was also so interesting and nice, because the diversity among the people there was so huge. You know, maybe I'm wrong, but I would imagine that if you were in Jerusalem amongst your owns in a way, or maybe even in Brooklyn or London, I don't think the diversity would have been that huge. I mean, of course, there are a lot of Gentiles, non-Jews. There were people with tattoos. There were people in all ages. There were observant, non-observant. There were really a huge diversity. And that's kind of a strange thing in a Norwegian society, which of course has turned into a multicultural society, but still is quite homogeneous. So, okay, so I guess my question is, does living in Norway make your life more or less diverse?
Living in Norway has made my life far richer, far deeper, far more humane than anything that I could have and would have experienced if I would have just stayed in Brooklyn, in London, or in Jerusalem. I mean, living a life among Norwegians, primarily, non-Jews, right? People are not Jewish. And even Jews that are living here in Norway whose life is very Norwegian, and being asked, not in a negative way, but being asked and being challenged all the time about why I do what I do. I don't mean now about my service or about my work. I mean about Judaism, what Judaism is. Why I get dressed in a black hat. When I grew up in London or in the yeshiva in Brooklyn, nobody ever asked why. I don't know. This is what we do, right? And suddenly to be asked everything all the time, and having to actually understand myself better, understand Judaism better, understand what the message of who we are as people, as human beings, as Jews, nothing in the world could have given me a more...
So being questioned forces you to reflect and make you a richer person, a better
Absolutely.
person.
Absolutely.
Takk for at du lytter til Akk Oy Vey Jødepodden. Om du liker denne podcasten, kan du trykke abonner i din foretrukne spiller. Da vil du motta beskjed om når neste episode blir publisert. Dersom du har spørsmål til Akk Oy Vey Jødepodden, eller vil bidra med innspill og ideer, send gjerne en mail til post@jødepodden.no. Akk Oy Vey Jødepodden støttet av Stiftelsen Fritt Ord. Musikken du hører komponert og arrangert av Jens Wendelboe.